myself who's been on a personal journey as well for the journey home. And, I think about how I, have been educated over the years about homelessness and providing housing for less and the compassion that has grown in myself and the education and the learning, not just myself, but the entire city of Medicine Hat. I think this has come a long way because of the work that you do. Still to this day, you think that the number one request I get in my office is not garbage, it's not pets, it's not playgrounds, paths, pools, or police. It is still a request from around the world to speak about the success here in Medicine Hat. Even today, I'll probably have a couple of meetings after this event. And who knows, anywhere in Canada or around the world. And that goes to talk about how important the work that you do, all of you do, is, and how meaningful it is to the rest of the world. And I talk about there's this, I've said it 1,000 times, this burning, aching need to do something around the world. And Medicine Hat is that beacon. And so thank you very much for everyone, for everything that you've done over these last 11 years on the journey home. This may be the last time I speak to you in an official capacity, and maybe you'll have to hear me drone on for another 4 years as well. But I just can't say enough that how proud I am to be the mayor of this city, how proud I am to speak to the world about your accomplishments. And oftentimes I get the credit for it, which is not always fair. But I do try to point out that the hard work that has been done by everyone here in some small way or some large way. So on behalf of City Council, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Clugston. I know that through the last 8 to 9 years, even the level of knowledge and understanding and learning has been tremendous between the homeless serving system and yourself as mayor, and before that council as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for your continued support and your understanding of the impact on our community when we actually do take care of our neighbors. And that's regardless if they have a home or not. I know our community becomes much better and the well-being of all individuals improves when we actually keep care of people. And that's everyone. So thank you for that. So I'd now like to invite our Member of Parliament of Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner, Glenn Motz.
Thank you very much, Jamie. And thank you for the invitation. And I'm honored to join all of you here this morning. Just before I start, I just want to, Iain, it's nice to see you again. I see the pandemic has not impacted the growth of your beard any, so that's awesome. Good for you. I want to begin by applauding, of course, the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society. This organization, as we know, has been in existence for many years and has made great strides and has had many accomplishments in addressing many issues in this community, and homelessness is certainly part of that. It was my privilege to rise in the House of Commons on June the 3rd and share with my colleagues there in the nation the success and historic national achievement of reaching functional zero chronic homelessness in this community. I can only imagine the endless time and energy and work that went into attaining that accomplishment, and I celebrated you there that day with pride. You have developed an effective data collection plan, created strong community partnerships, designed systems with engagement from people with lived experience. And all of these factors combine to be a testament of what can happen as a result of consistent work and community collaboration. You have made significant positive impacts on those experiencing chronic and episodic homelessness and to the vulnerable in our community. But you have also been a shining example on the national stage of what can collaboratively be accomplished. As I stated during my speech in the House of Commons that day, it was time we stopped managing homelessness and started to end it. Medicine Hat is that living example that broken systems can be fixed and homelessness is an issue that can be solved. It was an honor to serve on the board of the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society several years ago. And since leaving that, I have witnessed you remain true to your vision and values And that speaks directly to the great leadership that you continue to have within the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society, your staff, and your board and your leadership team. The values of respect and integrity, innovation, accountability, dedication, and collaboration. And these are all vital when dealing with the vulnerable populations we have in our communities. Many individuals experiencing homelessness have faced challenges that have left them feeling incredibly disrespected and in some cases worthless. When faced with the mental despair combined with the lack of basic physical needs, this organization continues to go above and beyond to ensure people are valued in their quest to find a safe place to live. The creativity of programs ensures that people, no matter their unique situation, can receive assistance. And you are truly an example of collaboration with many different organizations that you partner with in this community every day. As the mayor mentioned, we've just come through a season like most have never experienced before. And during that time, not only has this organization survived, it has thrived in its service to the people of this community. And I commend you for weathering that storm. If you can get through a global pandemic and achieve national recognition, I'm excited to see what new initiatives will be coming next. And I'm honored to celebrate your 11th year community reflection. And I wish you continued success, and will do all I can to support you and your endeavors in my role as Member of Parliament for Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Glenn. You have been and continue to be such a strong advocate for this community and the people that are still experiencing homelessness, those that have been housed and supported. And you really bring that voice to the national stage like we've never seen before. So thank you for that. So appreciate it. Each year, folks, we invite an individual that has lived experience or who works extensively in the field to bring our keynote address for you. This year, we are very grateful to have Iain with OrgCode Consulting back. Iain has been working in Medicine Hat since 2009, and welcome him to our celebration. Something I shared, haven't shared this with Iain yet, but the first time Iain and I actually did any work together in Medicine Hat was 11 years ago, 11 years and 3 days ago. To Facebook reminders. It was also the very first time that I met a fantastic colleague and community leader, and that was Selena Simmons, the very first time. It's also the only time I didn't pack my luggage on my return flight home. So without further ado, I would like to now hand it over to Iain. Thank you.
Very good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for having me here with this really important community celebration. When I think back about my time that I've had in this community over more than a decade, I've also thought about the ways in which my life has changed over that period of time. My family has grown, my beard has grown. I like to think that my knowledge has grown, and perhaps my insights are more impactful now than they have been in the early days. When I first met the community and I looked at the theme that we were looking to discuss today, and this idea of creativity amidst the chaos and growing from the challenges that the pandemic has faced, it made me reflect upon the early days of coming to this community. I'll be honest with you, I had heard of Medicine Hat and I had passed through Medicine Hat, but I had never really been to Medicine Hat before that. What I've acquired over the years are fantastic friendships, insights from practitioners that are doing the work with panache and with unrivaled results. And I've come to appreciate that this is a community that, as been stated, truly made the transition from wanting to manage homelessness to wanting to end homelessness. That wasn't without its challenges, especially in the early days when so much of the community conversation seemed to be mired not in the functional technocratic aspects of the job, but the ideological aspects of homelessness. A deserving and undeserving poor, a notion of resiliency that was somehow thwarted because of the experience of homelessness, that in those early days, homelessness was seen more as a diagnosis or as a label or as an attribution of otherness than it was an opportunity. And as I've come to appreciate the gains and the progress that's been made in this community, and truly said, a lightning, a beacon of hope that is available not just for the community and the province, but nationally and even internationally. I can't tell you how many times someone in Australia has stopped me and asked me if I've ever heard of Medicine Hat. So it's weird to be in the legislature in Australia and have someone ask me about a community tucked away in Southeast Alberta that I feel like I've been kind of observing the journey since the beginning. And the pride I feel of talking about the accomplishments and the reassurance it provides people to know that what seemed to be impossible can be made possible. And then the pandemic hit, didn't it? All of that progress, all of the movement forward, everything seemed to be aligning with ducks in the proverbial row, only to find that we are amidst a time of changing, not by our own doing, but because of the circumstances around us. And in that time of change, leaning into the possibility of making a difference. So my remarks today, and I do have a bit of a presentation to hold myself together, are really about these reflections on creativity amidst the chaos, about the ability to champion change and become beacons for the world in what is possible in the work of reducing and ending homelessness. And I'd like to start with a bit of a pre-pandemic story, a gathering at a dining room table. And the gathering at the dining room table, as we try to do in my family, usually requires having a diverse range of dinner guests to sit around the table. We like lively conversation and have been taken over the years by the honesty with which people can reflect on meaningful world events and life issues and societal troubles if you get the right people around the table. It's not just a place of conversation about how are the kids and where are you going on vacation. It is a structured place to engage in meaningful dialogue. But that doesn't mean it's without its challenges. And it was kind of reminiscent of those early days in conversations in Medicine Hat more than a decade ago. The challenges of, do we have the vocabulary to talk through our differences intelligently? Are we mired in preconceptions and perhaps misconceptions about what homelessness is and what solutions actually look like? So we're at the dinner table, and my wife decides that she's going to invite this couple, of which they are lawyers. And I will say that every preconceived notion I have about lawyers is also alive and well in moments such as that. And we're halfway through the dinner conversation, and we're having a conversation about homelessness and housing, social benefits, social safety nets, the different ways in which we as a society can go about nurturing and cultivating the talent and resiliency of people to help them acquire stability in their lives. And it got on to the conversation about the role of case managers, the people that do the work day in, day out on the front lines, the ones that stimulate conversations about change when people are often at their wits' end when it comes to any possible changes that need to be made. And the lawyer guy says to me, he says something like, the problem with case managers is, what is anybody really going to learn in life from someone whose best option was to become a case manager? He goes on to say, case managers are a lot like teachers. And you know what they say about teachers: those who can do, those who can't, become teachers or case managers. And it's at that moment that I decide to bite my tongue instead of his, because it's dinner conversation and it's supposed to be polite. I resist the urge to tell our table full of guests what they also say about lawyers. I mean, be honest, Iain, he says. What does a case manager even make? I wish he hadn't done that. Ask what I thought case managers make, because I have a policy about honesty and butt kicking. And that is, if you ask for it, I am required to give it to you. But I can be kind. And the kindness in putting back what does a case manager actually make starts with this notion of case managers make a difference. Amidst all the chaos, in the midst of uncertainty, those who are most talented in the space of affecting change in the lives of others are those that do it often without a parachute or a guidebook. We are imperfect human beings helping other imperfect human beings. And I can't always quantify the difference that our frontline staff make. Yes, I can look at the outputs, how many people are housed and how many people stay housed. Yes, I can look at outcomes, how do people's lives change and transform through the experience. But to really put my finger on everything that they do on a person by person basis, making for one program participant acquiring housing feel like getting the Order of Canada, and for someone else who achieves housing, making it feel like a stepping stone to that which is likely to be greater in the future. Case managers ultimately help people be brave enough to be themselves and to realize that in being oneself, they are enough. And so I know what case managers make. I know that they make this, marry this to achieve the results. And because it was polite dinner conversation and because I promised to keep this keynote PG, I won't show you the other finger I would feel necessary to demonstrate to the lawyer in the event he felt otherwise. The story is illuminating of the conversations around change and chaos. It is really about understanding the specific needs and talents of the people that we serve, engaging first from the front line and working our way back up through policy, as opposed to instilling policy and having it work its way itself down to the front line. And so we've come to a place in community and come to a place in Medicine Hat where I think that we can meaningfully engage in conversations about whether or not we see people experiencing homelessness as people with potential, or whether we see people experiencing homelessness as a problem to be solved. In all of my years of consulting, I've come to appreciate that there are and forever will be only 3 types of people that experience homelessness: someone's parent, someone's sibling, someone's child. The pursuit of an end of homelessness is not a deconstruction of the humanity of the people who have the lived experience of homelessness, but rather a celebration of their resiliency. The ability to break down those barriers that are often artificial in the person's lives because they've been told that they're not enough. And there are systems of support that have made and continue to make a huge transition throughout the entire country, which is to say, our response to dealing with a complex social issue has to be fueled by staff, organizations in a community that has the knowledge to put effective practice into motion to achieve results. What I think this community has demonstrated is a lesson that has been known in many other quarters but brought to light within the space of homelessness, is that it requires a professional response from professional people across a network of organizations. It requires government and community walking hand in hand. It requires finding suitable places for charitable volunteering, but also a distinction between that which can be done by compassionate people without training and that which training is required. In homelessness, the sector generally, it continues to be one of the only fields where we confuse a big heart with a big brain. That we think somehow if you care, you're qualified. Or we think that if someone has had the lived experience of homelessness, that automatically makes them an expert in homelessness. That's like me saying, I've had my gallbladder taken out. How would you feel about me taking out yours? Not a good idea, and not something I'm actually offering. Do we see people as a problem? Do we see their addiction, or do we see their personhood? Do we see their mental illness, or do we see their capability? Do we see their trauma, or do we see their recovery? When I was a younger practitioner in the field, and the pressures were on to have good numbers and good results and keep funders and elected officials satisfied in our pursuit of doing this, I can say that there can become a desensitization to the humanity of the work. And that even amongst the pandemic, as we're scrambling to figure out the right resources and the right combination of services to do the right things with the right people in the right ways, what is the lesson that we learned? Is that we need to design our response for people, not for the system itself. We must keep people at the center of everything that we do. We must remind ourselves and remind others around us that every person who is experiencing homelessness in our community is subject to the same charter for all Canadians. That we cannot violate human rights. And so, to do that, we have to stop equating homelessness with other street level activity. We have to stop seeing homelessness as a condition of otherness and start seeing homelessness exclusively as an address, or perhaps more accurately, the absence of one. This line, "I will love myself despite the ease with which I lean towards the opposite," is a fantastic line of poetry written by the very talented Canadian Shane Koyczan. He remarks it's one of the first lines he ever wrote. And I've taken this in my thinking and deliberating relative to the experience of homelessness, because I think that when we don't design from the person out, that the chaos is actually created by well-intentioned service system professionals that do not necessarily anchor their decision-making on the needs of the individual. And then those systems of support, air quotes, actually becomes systems of destruction, destroying resiliency, destroying the spirit, destroying the desire to live. Strange, I think, that homelessness also brings out in so many housed people a certain cognitive dissonance. I shall love my neighbor, but not that neighbor. I should be accepting and supportive. I shall be judgmental. I shall be in a position where I want a living, thriving, inclusive community. What does that mean? Our job in this space will be to help people discover a future that isn't dictated by their past. And I would say that the Medicine Hat story isn't just one of ending homelessness. It's one of embracing hopefulness. Because it starts with a belief in a future, in a world not yet seen. And that future-based reality that we want governs the decisions that are made in the present. We do this work of ending homelessness with an eye towards appreciating the importance of trauma-informed care, of a strengths-based approach, of harm reduction, of one that actually maximizes resiliency rather than tearing it down, of one that purposely avoids therapeutic incarceration. One of the indicators that I would look for in a community such as yours over time are changes in things like shelter use over time. what an absolute delight it was to be in the presence of shelter staff yesterday evening, to hear about their progress in the journey of becoming more trauma informed and housing focused in their work. And also, the numbers alone don't lie. Once upon a time, the conversation was about more shelter and more shelter and more shelter in this community. Now it's about, can we keep our numbers as low as they have been? Can we ensure that our shelters become not someone's last resort as a place to live, but as an opportunity, a process to get housed again? And can we do that in ways that stay true to the mandate of the organizations and are respectful of the different stories that people bring when they enter through that door? What you have demonstrated time and again over the past years as you got closer to the goal is that homelessness is not a punishment and that housing is not a reward. When people in other parts of the country talk about a rights-based approach to housing, I think, and my argument would be, that they don't understand necessarily what that means operationally. Because operationally, you as a community have demonstrated the ability to make those really difficult decisions and prioritization. You've demonstrated the ability to continue to engage with landlords. You've demonstrated the ability to continue to make sure that elected officials are as educated as they can be. And just a quick moment to acknowledge the mayor and his remarks this morning. I was so humbled to hear about the compassion and the learning over time. Because when we start at the likes of the dining room table with completely polar views on the particular issue, we do often see homelessness as a punishment. We see it as something that people deserve because of life choices that they've made or circumstances, as opposed to the real thing that we're seeing is a manifestation of a breakdown of systems, of trauma, and of loss of community. What I have loved about the approach that you've taken in this community, which I also think serves as an example for every other community, is that the ability to deliver on housing first has never been an exercise in housing only. That it is about supports, about reconnecting, about socialization, about ensuring that there's community integration. My fear at times in other communities, US communities that I've had the pleasure of working with, where they get to a place of ending homelessness, is they think it's a time for catastrophic, I will call it, they might call it traumatic, policy changes in how we look at homelessness. We've ended it. Now it's no longer top of the news. So now we can take different organizations and we can look at funding them differently or funding them less, or we can move services out of the downtown and we could put them elsewhere, or we can consolidate organizations and we don't need to be doing the same things that we've been doing. And I'll say, now is not the time to abandon that which got you to the success. Now is the time to lean further into what needs to be accomplished to ensure that that integrated, inclusive community is a place that allows for the potential of all residents to be realized. Okay. What are we doing? What is our expectation? Are we doing business or are we doing kindness? Because I think that there also manifests a thinking of a bit of a quid pro quo. Well, you provided us housing, therefore, what are you going to do for us? We provided you opportunity, what are you going to do for us? And I would say that in this time of transition and change, as we start to think about how do we continue to build back better, learn the lessons from the chaos of the pandemic and moving it forward, is that what actually fueled the response in the pandemic was kindness. Not business. Kindness. The ability to meet the needs of another, not because of expectation of anything in return, but because it was actually the right thing to do. Our job in this space is to then reconstruct the narrative of what success looks like. And so I'd like to show you something that has been around in my repertoire for more than a decade, through some work that Toby Druce and I did together. And it's this idea of how many, how much, also known as the statistical measure of badness amongst people's lives experiencing homelessness. We have two ends of the pole. We have some people whose lives are really bad, and we have some people whose lives are not all that bad. And we can take every person experiencing homelessness and housing instability in the community, and we can plot them all over the place. And you'll see generally that we have just as many people thereabouts as lives really bad as those not really bad. But the story we like to tell in ending homelessness is the redemption story. The redemption story is the person whose life was really bad, and through the miracle of nonprofit organizations and government investment, that their lives got to a place where it was not so bad, that we moved from one extreme to another. And in the pursuit of ending homelessness, we really need to continue to call BS on that. Our job is not radical transformation. And I hate to say it, but our success is actually helping people become the okayest version of themselves they can possibly be. And that being enough is enough. So for those people where their lives were really bad, and we think about all of the different stories that come with that and the humanity that comes with that, we're not going to move people from experiencing really bad to not so bad, at least not overnight. The goal of ending homelessness at a community level is to take a whole bunch of people whose lives are really not awesome and get them to a place where, you know what? You're okay. For so many of the people that we work with, it's about getting to maybe before we get to yes. And for all of those frontline staff who have worked tirelessly through the pandemic, they know that as they slap Band-Aids on different parts of broken systems operating in different ways over time, that it's the people that are being served that are the difference makers. They choose to change their lives. They choose to accept our supports. They choose to enter into housing. That their choice is not one of perfection. Their choice is one of continuous progress. People would say, oh, people in Medicine Hat, they must be like superheroes. I mean, you are. So let's not lose that. But I'd argue that you're a lot more like Clark Kent and a lot less like Superman. Clark Kent was a journalist of the humanities. He tried to understand people and society. Swooping into action was a last resort, in a heroic sense. Understanding was really the secret, heroic superpower. And so what is the superpower that I see in Medicine Hat relative to that understanding? An understanding that when it comes to people's lives and the systems of support that operate within them, that this is no longer about identifying gaps in services, it's about resolving stuck points. I don't need another person to tell me that there's a problem with the connection between, like, let's say, what's going on the local level and access to provincially funded mental health supports, or about barriers and accessing income supports, or about difficulties in getting people access to therapy on a long-term basis, or access to family doctors, or so on. Those things are already known. There's no new discovery to be had there. So the challenge, the creative opportunity out of all of this chaos is, what is going to be our plan to resolve the stuck points as opposed to identifying the gaps? And step one about resolving stuck points is figuring out who's stuck. nice crumpled up piece of paper. I want you to run an experiment at some point today, maybe when no one's looking, because it'll be a bit weird. I want you to take out just a single sheet of paper. I don't want you to crumple it up. I just want you to hold it about head high and drop it. And that single loose sheet of paper that's not crumpled up will slowly float to the ground. Then I want you to take that same sheet of paper and I want you to crumple it up, the tightest ball you can possibly make. And I want you to hold it at the same height and drop it. I know that most of you do not go into this line of work because things like, I don't know, science may not have been your strong suit. But I can assure you that the weight of the paper is the same. It hasn't changed. And yet one falls slower and the other falls faster. We're not going to talk about the forces of velocity and gravity and all of those good things. All we're going to say is our job of making a difference in this community, the thing that Medicine Hat has figured out how to do, and what I think is going to get you through the stuck points, is you know how to crumple up that ball. You know how to make things streamlined. You know how to engage from the community-based sector on up in ways that are not mired by 12 levels of bureaucracy. I mean, maybe it surprised you, maybe it doesn't, that in many other communities across the country, a person just as acute as someone in Medicine Hat experiencing homelessness would often have to wait 12 or 18 months to find access to housing. It's not because you're a smaller community, although that's what people gravitate to. It's because you know how to streamline the processes of getting people to the resolution of their homelessness. As we think through those stuck points, I think it's that same sort of approach of being more narrowly engaged in solutions as opposed to trying to take care of the omnibus underground reasons that's really going to get you to a place of resolve. There's probably very good reason why addiction services operate the way they do, mental health services operate the way they do, income supports operate the way they do, etc. We're not going to unearth, we're not going to solve all those. It's not our job to solve those. All I need to know is, if I have someone that I've moved into housing, how do I get access to community-based supports or government-sponsored supports that they need? I don't need the fluff and the drama. I need the solution. One of the strengths of your community, I would say, has been the unwavering resolve to be pragmatic. It's not always what's pretty, but it's what works. So how are we going to do this? Well, there will be a natural tendency to say, with the challenges that are in front of us now, what we really need is a more robust charitable response. It's the first step in responding in just about every single complex social issue. And even when you get to milestones and level and you know the systems start to change, it's amazing how people come back to that. I think it'd be very interesting, for example, to examine ways in which charitable organizations are continuing to meet immediate needs, but are incapable of focusing on solutions. Not because there's anything wrong with the charity itself, it's just that the charity can't solve the complex social issue, it can only respond to it. Think about things like food insecurity. We need programs to help people address food insecurity, but it's not addressing the underlying cause of food insecurity. Our next step up the approach, the ladder, is often bureaucratic responding. That is often related to what is the government program or policy that is going to get us to the next level and what we need to do. And that's important. There is absolutely a role for government in all of this. Municipal government, provincial government, federal government, putting all orders of government into a place where they each have a role in the response to homelessness. But homelessness isn't going to be ended because a bunch of public servants or elected officials decided that they had the best program design. We've seen loads of examples of bureaucratic responding to complex social issues that didn't achieve the intended results. Example, how's the war on drugs coming along? So we need a new type of needs assessment. Not the type of needs assessment in the early days of capturing volumes of homelessness and those sorts of things. We need a new type of needs assessment that actually says, of those who are remaining homeless in the community, what are their needs? And in our response to the community, what are the needs that we can leverage in that, what is the understanding of those needs that we can leverage in our response and design? At a minimum, we need to start there. From needs assessment, we get to a place where we can do some meaningful community development work. And when we start to do meaningful community development work, now we see the opportunities for integration and inclusivity. There's two different tracks that I think we need to think about when it comes to community development and ending homelessness. One will be, what does purposely built and or purposely run housing, supportive housing like the PSH building, how does that integrate into community and what's its role? How many more of those do we need? Where do we need them in the community? How will they be served and supported? That's one. And the second, which I think is part of the story of success in Medicine Hat, is how do we integrate people into basically private market accommodation throughout the community with or without subsidy, depending upon his, her, or their needs. Because in the 5 core principles of Housing First, the 5th, and the one that's forgotten about quite frequently, is social and community integration. It's only when people experience that integration that they get to a place where they can truly exercise personal advocacy. It's no longer about a worker or a program, it's about a person. So person-centered design is really how we're going to continue to leverage what we've learned out of the chaos. And we're going to be in a place where we'll still follow the traditional approach to developing policy, and from policy we have procedures, and from procedures it informs practice, and practice impacts people. But more so than at any other time, the pandemic has taught us that you really have to start with the needs of people and work up. Don't have a place for people to go during the day? That's not a policy conversation to start, that's a people decision to start. We have real people in real time with real needs that need a place to go. When we start talking about the housing opportunities that we might need to continue to sustain where we're at in reaching functional zero, that's a conversation about the needs of people. And once you get to this place where people start to drive the innovation and changes that you make in the community going forward, you can truly embrace the law of diffusion of innovation. If you're unfamiliar with the law of diffusion of innovation, I want to break it down for you because I think this is really the lessons learned through the pandemic and where we go next. Is that necessity requires innovation. Innovation requires innovators. Innovators are a very rare breed because they are the individuals who aren't just solely reactive, but are also proactive in the space of trying to affect change. Innovators are idea people. And in that space of innovation, for any of you who've ever tried to come up with something new and creative, you know not all creative ideas are actually practical, and not every creative idea is actually implementable. So that space of innovation is kind of tinkering. It's the social laboratory trying to figure out how to make any and all of this work. But in those early stages of starting to pop up different types of programs and services, especially in daytime, looking at the ways in which shelter was operating, the roles of housing staff and engagement, you get to a place where certain ideas stick. And when those certain ideas stick, we start to get some early adopters. Not just within the nonprofit world and not just within the government world, but outside of our sectors of service, we have other people who start to buy in to understand what differences we need to make moving forward to continue to sustain and even improve upon the effectiveness of functional zero in this community. And we're really, I think, at a tipping point in terms of the future relative to creativity and innovation amidst chaos, which is what ideas are going to take hold to give us the early majority. What's going to be our tipping point? If we think about stuck points, not gaps, if we think about that which we know as opposed to that which we don't know, and we think about people who are already in a position of experiencing homelessness and housing instability and require our services, getting to a place of that tipping point, I would say, is going to require a coalition of people who continue to say that people experiencing homelessness have rights, have potential, have capability. That should get us over the hump where the late majority comes on board. You could watch this first 4 steps play out 10 plus years ago in Medicine Hat. A bunch of innovators want to do something different on homelessness, get a few agencies and some people on board. They start to do the work. Other organizations and agencies got on board. We got the early majority. Then everybody else started to get on board, the late majority. But oh, by the way, there will always be, according to the law of diffusion of innovation, laggards. These are the same people who want to use a rotary phone. They're the same people who want to use a flip cell phone. The laggards don't want to change, or they don't want the change that's being presented. One of the things that happened in a city in Louisiana that got to a place of ending homelessness amongst veterans is they found that after they announced ending homelessness, that the criminalization of homelessness went way up. Why? Because of the voice of the laggards. Well, they've ended homelessness. That means that only the people who don't want help are left outside. That means that we should take a much stronger approach towards those people who didn't access services. The laggards can be a loud voice. The laggards can also talk about investing in different things, doing different things as opposed to innovating. And the laggards, another name for them might be javelin tossers. And innovators know what it's like to be captain of the javelin catching team. It's a really crappy job. First, we attack the idea. If we can't attack the idea, we attack the process. If we can't attack the process, we attack the people. So our light bulbs of creativity have to be both in the space of innovation as well as combating the voice of the laggards. We cannot let a few dominate the impact of the majority. Does ending homelessness mean there's no people experiencing homelessness? No. So what is the inspiration, the creativity that comes out of the chaos? Well, we have the opportunities to be authors of inspiration. We get to write the story of what's next. We get to be in a position where we are continuously creating hopes, and as my friend Jeff said, continue to be guardians of stories. Let us embrace the fact that we are difference makers amidst chaos. Let us break down our thinking now into 4 critical questions moving forward in the community. What is the change that we need to make? What's the thing we need to unstick? What are we doing or not doing instead of that thing? So if we think connection to, I'll just use an example that I've heard this week, that connection to mental health services is weaker than one would like. That's not necessarily a fault of the mental health system. That's not a fault of the homelessness system. It's really a conversation about unsticking the thinking to get to a place where you say, well, what are we doing or not doing instead? Well, I can tell you a lot of people complain about the mental health system, but we haven't asked the mental health system, what are you doing or not doing instead? Third critical question, what are our competing commitments? What it usually comes down to is seeing homelessness as a problem as opposed to potential. And because it's seen within the problem label, as opposed to the potential and opportunity perspective. We see it as competing commitments that somehow, for example, a thriving downtown and the presence of homelessness are incompatible. As opposed to a thriving downtown can be an inclusive space that actually allows for a variety of people of different income and life stories to come together. And what are the big assumptions that we're making? I would urge you to make a lot of mistakes. I would absolutely say that because you have the credibility of reaching functional zero, you have some permission to make more mistakes than other communities. Make really, really, really thoughtful mistakes. Learn from those mistakes. I mean, simple rules, don't kill people. Like that's a mistake that's unforgivable. But trying to figure out the perfect programs with the perfect staffing model and the perfect location ain't gonna happen. No community figures that out right the first time. As I thought about creativity coming out of the chaos, I was also reflecting upon lessons learned by the sector overall, not just Medicine Hat over this period of time, although I think a lot of this will resonate with you during the time of growth and change and opportunity. One, resiliency is real. People experiencing homelessness are resilient. People who have been moved from homelessness into housing are resilient. And staff are resilient. Organizations are resilient. Never underestimate the impact of celebrating resiliency. We couldn't do all the things we used to do in the way that we used to do them. We had to do things differently. It could have totally upset the apple cart. The reverse is probably true, that we learned that some people are more capable of things than we ever gave them credit for, whether that be staff and organizations, complete organizations, or people experiencing homelessness. Two, motel accommodation, it turns out, is preferable for most people throughout the country and will continue to be an important part of the toolbox as we continue to move forward. Three, while some communities have struggled to house people during the pandemic, other communities have housed more than others. So again, to say what Medicine Hat has achieved during a pandemic, getting to the finish line of functional zero, is nothing short of amazing, because I could list off numerous communities throughout Canada that essentially gave up on housing people when the pandemic started and now find themselves in a much worse position in responding to homelessness. Four, it turns out housing still ends homelessness. Still the only known cure. That hasn't changed during the pandemic. It is impossible to involve healthcare and public health in a meaningful way to respond to homelessness, but we need to be cautious that it doesn't thwart the efforts to do housing first. I was part of a very large encampment response about 45 minutes from my home outside Toronto. And there's a bunch of doctors involved. And I thought, fantastic, we finally have some street level psychiatry and doctors who are doing some wound care and moving things forward. And to a person, these medical professionals kept talking about these people, which was a lightning rod for me, otherness. What they really need is to be trained for housing and to be stabilized for housing. I'm thinking, well, that's not housing first. Can I show you the evidence? And it's amazing how really intelligent people sometimes want to not look at evidence. Lessons learned by the sector. And I think this is going to be a very important one for this community. A community without an encampment response strategy and outreach will struggle with unsheltered homelessness. There already is evidence of people camping out in different parts of this community. That has continued to grow during the pandemic and likely will continue to grow for some time as we get into whatever stage of the response that we're talking about now in a pandemic. But that encampment response strategy has to be robust, linked to housing first, connected into housing, and all about trying to help people achieve a resolution to their homelessness. But what community after community has been learning is that that encampment response strategy needs to be led by social service professionals, not by law enforcement. That they can work together in complementary ways towards achieving a goal, but we really need this driven by professionals who know how to end homelessness. We need integration and co-location. Many of these were propped up throughout the pandemic, throughout the country, and tons of lessons learned. I think as we start to think about future facilities and opportunities in this community, potentially, how do you co-locate homeless services, health services, support services, and housing services in one place? As opposed to having people go here, there, and everywhere. It turns out harm reduction is a life-saving necessity that must be practiced well. It's not a fad, it's not an add-on, it's not a nice to do, it's an essential. And then every new shelter bed that we add or motel bed we add has to come with a permanent housing solution to it as well, or we won't have throughput. And it is an opportunity to build back better. So what does building back better look like? How do we gain more control from the chaos and use our creativity? Housing, housing, and housing. It's got to be about housing. It's got to be about more community-based follow-up supports for people to move into housing. And I'm not just talking about case managers or follow-up workers of organizations. I'm talking about increasing the integration of mobile addiction and mental illness response in community. I'm talking about stabilizing funding. That if we really want communities like this one to continue on their pathway, now is not the time for decreasing investment in Medicine Hat. Now is the time to increase investment in housing to show what the next level of pandemic response looks like. That we need integrated services, not siloed services. And again, that's the stuck point, not the gap. That's about trying to figure out how do we do it. And I don't care if we call it a pilot, if we call it a new initiative, if we call it active learning, social laboratory, community-based research, do whatever you need to do, but let's actually get some of those services together. And to make that happen, we're probably going to need some allies outside of the nonprofit sector. We're going to need government elected officials that open up some of those doors for conversations for us. We're going to need members of the business community to be appealing and advocating for some of those things to happen, because the problems that they want solved are often outside the control of the agencies that actually respond to homelessness. We need to continue to end ineffective services and really ask ourselves, what does success look like, and are we achieving that success? We need to promote equity within our response, and something that this community has done well in its prioritization processes over time. We need to acknowledge that this is a professional service that deserves appropriate funding and staff salaries. You want to retain a workforce that knows how to end homelessness? Pay them. You want to lose the brain trust that got Medicine Hat to a place where homelessness was ended? Keep salaries where they're at. And we'll need continued political and community education on homelessness and solutions. We have people who are burning out because of the chaos. We need to create an environment for them to reestablish their identity in the way that it was before. We need to find balance in our system and not look at it as a pursuit of time management, but as a pursuit of boundary management. Whose job is it to do what? How do we do things together? And as I head into the last part of my conversation, I just want to talk about some fatal flaws when creating change out of chaos. First, emotional fragility. We need to be open to change, and we need to let go of some of our emotional tendencies to hold on to things if we're going to make that happen. Two, we also need to combat overconfidence and arrogance. Yes, you've ended homelessness, but now you're in the pursuit of sustaining an end to homelessness. We need integrity. We need open and honest dialogue. We need to overcome defensiveness and combat that with openness. And we need strong interpersonal skills to make it work. Because leadership in ending homelessness is not about chasing power. It's about chasing accountability. And the creativity and the chaos, the accomplishments, not just over the past decade, but specifically over the past year and a half, has never been about power in this community as I've seen it. It has been about being accountable to the people we served and the maintaining their lives. Now we are accountable to continue our pursuit of adding more housing, integrating more supports, and overcoming our stuck points. Thanks for having me with you this morning to share my thoughts and reflections. It is really an honor to be with this community, and I'm so grateful to call so many of you friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iain. That was, as expected, phenomenal. I'm always in a state of awe when you speak and share your knowledge and wisdom, encouragement for a community, inspiration for a community, and kind of really sets community on that stage of where we need to go, what we need to think of, how we can continue to progress our efforts, and really getting back to our basics of our why that we are choosing to do this work and help individuals and help community and families to be that much better and to really embrace that sense of belonging for all members of our community. So thank you, thank you, thank you. For folks that do want to kind of pick Iain's brain later, he is coming to the barbecue a little bit, so you can track him down there a little bit. So yeah, please do join us there. We're going to now roll into our just information on progress report. If folks want to, they can look on our website right now. So it's the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society website. It will be on your latest news and events if you scroll down, and you will see a document that looks like this here. In this document, we can't really present it well. I'm going to have a PowerPoint to go through a little bit just to really highlight it for folks, but you can look in there. What we did this year is we asked all of our programs that were in the trenches doing that continuous work that they always do to give us some insights about what creativity and chaos meant for them. And it was I'm always impressed with the level of information, kindness, caring, compassion that the workers exude. Cannot say enough about sticking through this pandemic. On one part of me says I'm in awe, but the other part is it's expected as well, because that is what you do every day, pandemic or no pandemic. So I think to start off our creativity and chaos progress report to community, there is one picture in there that is around from Medicine Hat Community Housing Society Outreach Program. And it says, one of the shirts says outreach worker because badass miracle worker isn't an official job title. If it was, and if they fit on business cards, we'd probably have that for all of those programs and services and the individuals that serve our vulnerable population throughout our community. Need to say thank you before we start, because if I get to the end and I forget, I will feel terrible. Thank you to you for joining today. Thank you to Iain, of course. Always thank you to Iain, not just for your keynote, but for being a constant in this community and really helping to shape and drive change and really bettering our community and the people that are doing the work here. So thank you for that. Huge thank you to our Community Council on Homelessness that actually oversees and does the funding recommendations for all the programs and services here in Medicine Hat around our homeless initiatives. All three levels of government. In this community, we're very fortunate, regardless of party lines. There is a understanding that efforts to end homelessness and get people into housing, that is constant in this community. That's something that in other jurisdictions I know is fought quite a bit and not supported. So can't say enough about leaders at all levels of government here in Medicine Hat. And I think that's what makes Medicine Hat fantastic, is regardless of party lines and politics, it's that understanding. Our community, talk about our community council, many of them are on the call, Zoom meeting with us today. The Medicine Hat Community Housing Society Board of Directors, always supportive and allows us to really do this great work in community. So thank you for that. I need to also take the time to thank my staff. So past staff, Tammy Hoffman, who is in a different position now, Carrie Sanford, who designed the progress report, all the media staff as well. I think we'll have to get I've gotten many text messages from folks saying, can we get shirts that say, don't be a laggard? Maybe something we want to think about going forward. Need to say thank you to Dominique as well, for pulling together the stats, doing the statistical work and the pullout service delivery plan. And Dominique also developed a majority of the community engagement presentations that we did. And then last and certainly not least, Amy Richardson, who is a wizard and is pulling together lots of information, getting set on the systems transformation work as well. So just wanted to take the time to acknowledge my staff, who are a lot of times behind the scenes, but are amazing at bringing all this work to life. And really want to acknowledge that I'm just by title, have the fortunate ability to share the good work of Medicine Hat at all different levels. It's not that we do the work, it's that we support the work that is being done by the individuals that are experiencing homelessness, and by all of you that are actually doing the hard work and supporting individuals in their journey to get housing and maintain that housing. So thank you for the honor of allowing me to speak on behalf of your work and of the people that you serve. So that is definitely not lost on me. So I'm now going to attempt to share my PowerPoint. I had a big speech, but after Iain's, I'm not going to do my speech. I'm just going to walk through some stuff because I think he said all those important things. So I'm going to go back a few, sorry, folks. So our creativity and chaos this year, this was a theme that was selected to really capture the chaos that we experienced last year, just to a different degree. And that's to say that we always experience some type of chaos, and it's really how you welcome it into it. Chaos is not necessarily a bad thing. It actually helps us drive and do a lot better and really pare down, burn it down, build it up. But really just to honor the creativity that the workers and that individuals in community and the general public had to get creative about how they were actually operating in that year and how they were choosing to function or sometimes not function. These are just going to go really high level with our programs that we fund in our community, whether that's through provincial or federal funding that we receive. So the Medicine Hat Women's Shelter Society delivers the Housing First program. The Medicine Hat Community Housing Society delivers a Housing Link program, which some of you will know is used to be called our Central Intake program. Canadian Mental Health Association is operating the Permanent Supportive Housing program. Meowson Friendship Center, the Cultural Addictions program. McMahon Youth, Family and Community Services Association, Links House Recovery Stabilization Beds. They also do the Youth Hub Outreach and the Roots Youth Shelter, which transitioned over the last couple years as well. Other supports that we actually have in our community is our Graduate Rental Assistance Initiative program, which is our GRAY. We support community capacity building as well as centralized rental supports, which includes ensuring that families that are maybe not experiencing family violence don't stay in shelter where that family unit is not broken up. So that's the provision of hotels. And it's also the provision of kind of those one-offs that kind of don't fit anywhere, but we can support individuals in that, whether that's transportation to recovery, our treatment programs. And it's just it's a very flexible type of funding. We also do utility deposit guarantees through that type of programming. Through our COVID response funding as well, wanted to share this with community, is these are the services that were funded through our COVID response. So we did fund the social services at the Medicine Hat Library, food connection with the Medicine Hat and District Food Bank, our COVID-19 isolation units for vulnerable populations and community that was delivered by McMahon, and then our COVID-19 emergency daytime shelter that was operating out of a few different locations, but McMahon was overseeing that in the second wave of the COVID, and that program continues. So just really wanted to highlight who we're talking about. And in saying that, these are just the services that are funded. These are not all the services that support vulnerable populations in Medicine Hat. We talk about things like income support and mental health and addiction, the Medicine Hat Police Service, our landlords, especially our landlords, really hard to effectively house people if you don't have access to housing units and rental accommodation. So these are just some of the programs and services that I've just mentioned that actually help with the work of ending homelessness. But all those little things absolutely help to get people housed and stabilized. We think about the YMCA that does, that offers some free membership for people that are experiencing homelessness. That creates integration and meaningful daily activity for folks as well. So it's not just these services that do it. They do the bulk of the initial work, but it's all those other connections to other services that really help maintain a really healthy system of care. Shelters, we do have 3 shelters in our community. So the Salvation Army Center of Hope, which we are just emerging on a new path with them. We have staff from Housing Link now going there in the morning, working with individuals and really seeing that shelter shift to a more housing focused shelter. So we are grateful that they are walking along that journey with us. Medicine Hat Women's Shelter Phoenix Safe House. And one of their big shifts is that they started to accept men a couple years ago now. So it's anyone experiencing violence. And then the Roots Youth Shelter, which is a 4-bed facility in partnership with the Government of Alberta Children's Services. So now onto our data. Our data always tells a great story. So the impact of housing first in Medicine Hat, and I hope that you were able to go into the website and download that. You can probably see it a little bit better. So the impact of housing first in Medicine Hat, I need to have this disclosure. These numbers are specific only to our housing first programs. It means only those on the slides previous, it was around housing first. At the time, rapid rehousing was included as well, and permanent supportive housing. It does not include all the work through diversion and rapid resolution and other programs. So just need to make that disclaimer. So to date in Medicine Hat, well, I shouldn't say to date, sorry, from April 1st, 2009 to March 31st of this year, we've collectively housed 995 unique adults and 328 children. Again, that's numbers low because it's just our housing first programs. And I'll explain that a little bit later. And when we look at household type, single parents made up 18% of those housed. Dual parent families made up 3%, couples made up 5%. And like we see in most jurisdictions, single individuals really outweighed any other family size or demographic or household type with 74%. We see these numbers reflected as well when we look at waitlists for social housing as well. The need to have single served is very high. Veterans housed as well. We've housed 21 veterans since the onset of our plan to end homelessness, which for community of Medicine is relatively high. And then ethnicity is there as well for folks to have a look. So at the time of intake in all of our programs and services, we collect this information because it helps inform some bigger system and policy. I'm not going to say flaws, opportunities to look at and really get predictive and how we can maybe change things long term. So 69% of the people that participated in our programs reported that they had a mental health condition. 49% reported a physical health condition. 43% reported issues with substance abuses or substance use. 6% reported that they were diagnosed with FASD at some point in their life. Only 13% of the people we serve noted none of the above. So if we reflect back to Iain's, one of Iain's slides in his presentation, when we're looking at who we serve, it's not just people on the really far ends that we are serving. So yes, it is normal for us to serve within our homeless serving system, people that don't have any of those noted issues. They might have other issues like job loss, family breakdown as well, but they don't need to come in with an issue necessarily in that way. So it's very diverse about the people that we actually serve. 1% of people didn't have it, was just unreported on their intake. These numbers are always shocking for folks. 36% of the people that we serve were at some time or currently exposed to or fleeing family violence. So when we look at causes of homelessness or what makes people lose their housing, family violence is one of those things. And 24% reported being in foster care at some point in their life. So those numbers are significant. On a more heartstring side of things and heart-wrenching side of things, we have grieved 34 individuals that we served in our programs and that we housed, stabilized, assisted with them on their case goals since 2009. The past year alone, we've lost 8 individuals. And something that I want to leave you with on a more, I think maybe more personal note is that When we have to notify families, or we assist programs notifying families, whether that's with police or whoever, that their loved one has passed away, and they come to the unit and retrieve their belongings. One of the images that will forever be embedded in my mind and my heart is, I find it shocking when the family member will always pull up a chair to the fridge, open the fridge, and say they had food, and it looks like they were eating healthy. So when we talk about grief and loss, those are some images that I know some of you experienced with me as well. But the profoundness of the families that their loved one was actually living and had great access to food and supports, and just that visual is something that will never be lost on me. And that graciousness of loved ones, not just the people that we serve. They're proud that they have orange juice. They loved orange juice. So there's just a visual there. So I don't want to stay in this moment too long in terms of that, but that does happen. This also does not include the individuals that we lost to suicide this year, that were housed part of our programs, and that carried on or graduated. They were members of our community as well, that were a little bit more vulnerable. So we have experienced significant death and loss, whether that's through overdose, natural causes, or suicide as well. So really don't want to lose sight of that. As much as we talk about celebration, can say without a doubt those individuals died with dignity. They were housed and they were supported throughout that journey. So now when we transition over to our programs and services on a more positive note, folks, when we look at the actual impact of these programs and services. So these are the programs and services that I initially talked about in the original slide. So just really want to go through that. Some of our highlights are Graduate Rental Assistance Initiative program, serves on average of 56 unique individuals a month, and gives out to private landlords just shy of $16,000 every month. So we support those landlords in topping up those individuals' rent so that they can maintain their housing stability. It's individuals that no longer need the support of case management. They might still access other supports and services, but they don't actually need a program case management support to assist them through that. The counseling program that was funded through and operated by Meosin saw 457 unique individuals get access to cultural addiction support. And that's really about a healing journey and looking at recovery through healing in the traditional sense. The Youth Hub Outreach always rocks it out year after year with McMahon. They had 147 unique individuals that were assisted through that program, and only 27 of those unique individuals returned for more service or a rate of recidivism back into that program. And they also had 86 family reunifications within that program. The Roots Youth Shelter as well served 20 youth this year, and that's in our shelter utilization as well. Housing Link, which is our key point of entry into our homeless serving system and programs and supports to get people housed, had 277 new individuals that were assessed. So if an individual comes into our system and has from 2009 onwards, we will know if they've touched our homeless serving system. So this is 277 unique individuals that first touched our system in that year. Total assessments, because people can get reassessed, 565. So quite a large number of individuals that are being supported through diversion, now called rapid resolution. That program alone, through Housing Link, housed 128 unique individuals. So while we're very much housing first philosophy and we have housing first programs, having a wide array of programs and services that actually can house people based on what their needs are is huge success in medicine. I can't say enough about us being able to rapidly and quickly get people into housing and supported through that. Housing loss prevention, 36 households were assisted to not lose their housing. So it's individuals that have housing, not connected to program, but actually just something happened. So instead of them losing their housing and having to come in directly through our homeless serving system and participate in programming, this actually keeps them housed. It will help with one-time payment for rental arrears or for utility arrears to prevent that follow through with eviction that they've received from the landlord. So that's a little bit about it. This is a quote from a program participant. And sometimes it is just that simple, folks. Utilization of public systems. We continue to see increases and decreases in the inappropriate use of public systems. As always, we see a huge reductions for the number of days in jail from the time that when we baseline and look at people that are just coming into our program versus their duration in the program. So we do have decreases in those types of utilization. We do see increases and have seen an increase in EMS interactions as well as court appearances. And that's okay. That's people needing to access services when they need to access services, and 32% reduction for the number of days in jails overall in community as well. When we look at this year over year, those numbers are skewed. And so we present that on our service delivery plan. If you go to the website and look at our service delivery plan, we present the cumulative, so 2009 to current, but we also just do a 1 year time frame as well. So you can see the difference that data holds there. Always question the data, folks. When we look at our total community-based shelter utilization, this is a big tell in Medicine Hat. This is amazing. We have a 64% reduction in shelter utilization since 2009. That's phenomenal. That's a good indicator of lots of different things, that our services and our systems are working well, and that we have still some work to do, though. We obviously still have some work to do. But we look at even just the Salvation Army Center of Hope, and those numbers have dropped significantly. That's actually where we see the most reduction. And that can be located in our service delivery plan to actually see those numbers. And we want to see these numbers continue to go down. We will always need emergency shelters in our community. They should only be used for emergencies and not as living environments for people when they have access to your types of programs and services, folks. COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know if it's done yet or not. I know things have reopened. I'm hesitant to talk too much about our COVID-19 pandemic because I want people to go to the progress report and actually have a read through. I cannot say enough about this community, the resiliency of our participants, those frontline workers, businesses and community owners. I know our report mentions Dr. Nicole Warner, who actually was the first doctor who reached out with masks and provided masks that a sewing group had developed. Little do people know that behind the scenes, she actually got them approved by Alberta Health Services and Dr. Monty at the time. So we were provided with thousands of cloth masks because we did not have PPE, and the PPE came very, very late to Medicine Hat. So the frontline workers going out, doing the work still, doing the daytime shelter and the isolation, cannot say enough about your bravery amongst the unknown, and that we were there to support our vulnerable population that came in and trusted us enough to help guide them through the pandemic and support them through the pandemic. Also talk about Christine Russell, who started the PPE group for Medicine Hat, and Mr. Lube and Chris Hellman, who allowed the space to have a shipping container there so that we can have donations dropped off there for PPE, and our local businesses that made hand sanitizer when we didn't have any, and that we could distribute it to our program partners, and not just our program partners, we distribute to other people in care facilities that didn't have any. So can't say enough about how this community really came together and supported each other, quite frankly, in our collective work. So very proud of the work we did. It was not without its bumps with our hotels and all the rambunctiousness that maybe went on there. So really good learning and opportunities. And the 9 hotels that we were able to utilize through the pandemic, those were game changers that saved lives, undoubtedly saved lives. when we looked at shelter protocol as well, the ability for us to shift and refocus, and the level of trust amongst colleagues and community was tremendous. We were doing a lot of different changes based on the best information that we had at the time, which sometimes we didn't know a hell of a lot. So thank you for trusting along that process, and just, you know, grit is a word that was used by McMahon in their write-up, and can't say enough about this community's grit and ability to move forward and carry forward with that. So I will turn your attention back to the report and have a look at some of our highlights through that. So the year ahead, we're already in the year ahead. Typically we do a celebration in June, but this one's a little bit late for folks. And the year ahead, we are looking at alternative housing models. We're looking at the potential of having a hostel. We are looking at shifting our daytime shelter into resource center maybe, and looking at how we can redefine that. We are still doing work on our systems transformation project and how we can redefine some of those things. We are looking at, of course, indigenizing our entire system and investing into that. So we have a really exciting year ahead. We are looking collectively at what we don't need to be doing and how we can reinvest those funds, that energy and those resources into making change for community that is longstanding, and that we can actually move forward a little bit. Yes, we'll look at sustaining our functional zero, but also know that things can change in a heartbeat. And our responsibility is to be accountable, and also to have the insight and be responsive, not reactive to the present needs, and look at future needs in our community as well. So I think we have we have a phenomenal group of leaders, whether that's the frontline worker up to the executives or community leaders that get this work and are really committed to making change that is, you know, that will be sustainable, and that it will hit all the high points, and that will actually really make some huge shift this year that are positive for the entire community. This is a quote that came as kindness changes everything. And with that, I'm going to end this. Thank you for your continued hard work. Thank you for being leaders. Thank you for leading with compassion. Thank you for asking difficult questions. And thank you for demanding change, and demanding that, you know, we create a better community, better services for those that still need our assistance. So again, please join us at 11:30, anytime between 11:30 and 1:30 at Veterans Park. Come down and say hi, grab a bottle of water, and we look forward to seeing you. Thanks, folks.